This is The Metro. I'm Sam Corey, sitting in for Robin Vincent. Home ownership is considered to be a critical piece of the American dream. That's not for no reason. Wealth is often passed down from generation to generation through homes. But in Detroit, there are many properties that have not been properly passed down from parent to child. Why? And how can that be changed? Detroit Future City is working with several foundations and the city of Detroit to offer a solution. I recently spoke with Sherry Williams, the director of Equitable Neighborhood Planning for Detroit's Future City, about that and more. Detroit has over 5,000 existing heirs properties where all the recorded legal owners of the property are deceased. So basically, it's the heirs properties that have not claimed the property yet, right? The children of the property's owners have not claimed that property. Is that right?
Yeah, and that is based on the data that we were able to collect. We know that number is likely much higher in Detroit. And just to make sure that we're clear, what we're talking about is an inherited property, or an heir property is what we call it, which is any property is passed down without a will or without going through the legal probate process. So the deed never actually gets updated. And so, yes, when we talk about that 55 plus 100 homes, those are the homes that we're talking about.
You said it's probably higher than that number, than 5,500. Why do you think that's the case?
Based on the data that we were able to collect, we were able to uncover 5,500 homes. However, that data only goes back a few years. And so what we know is that there are homes that have been in this tangled title situation for many years beyond where we were able to collect. So that is why we know it is likely an undercount, but it's still a pretty solid number, because what we were also able to connect to that 5,500 homes is that that's approximately over $300 million in family wealth that is really left out in the world that's not tapped by families. And so that's lost wealth in our community.
It is. It's a lot of value that could be claimed that isn't. And I think the immediate question that comes to mind is, like, what are the reasons that children, that heirs, are not claiming something that is theirs?
There's a lot of reasons why I think we can point to this issue. We conducted focus groups during our research a year and a half ago, and a lot of the things that we uncovered through the conversations with heirs is partially there's a lack of conversation about this topic in families. There's some distrust of our systems that also exists and is keeping people from going through these processes. But there's also just a lot of other challenges. Some of those other challenges include navigating the process itself may be a bit cumbersome and complex for folks. There's also cost associated with it. There's also some of those historic challenges that have impacted communities, particularly Black communities, with redlining. There's also been a lack of estate planning supports. So if you kind of combine all of that, the emotional components and some of the cultural barriers, along with some of the historic challenges that have impacted our communities, I would say those are the reasons why people are not going through this process.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can expound on this a little bit, because I think it's an important point, which is you're talking about redlining and mistrust that some Black folks have of the system of, buying homes, negotiating homes. Of course, Black people across the country, but certainly also in Detroit, have been redlined. They've been kept out of a number of different neighborhoods, or had been so for quite some time. That's not the case anymore, but people still are skittish about the system. How does this all connect? Are people like, okay, historically this has not gone well, or I don't really interact with maybe real estate agents. I don't really interact that much with banks that are lending mortgages. And so I don't even know who to talk to or where to go, or whether I trust somebody who deals with transfers of titles and deeds and what have you. Is that the right thinking, or is there a different kind of thought process that happens for folks that these deeds don't get transferred to the heir's name?
I think it's a combination of so many things. Yes, our systems don't operate against our Black communities the way they did in the past. That is true. But I like to call it, this is a Shari term, not necessarily a Detroit Future City term, but I like to think of it as a culture shift. And it's like, what do we need to do to cultivate this culture shift? Because those historic impacts, they've left a lasting impression on our communities. And even if I point to my own family as an example, like having this conversation, even personally, it's still a challenge, right? It's not only have many of my older family members been a part of a lot of those injustices, they've seen it firsthand. It's having them kind of shift the way they're thinking around it. The processes themselves are just a little cumbersome. So you need to have the time, you need to have the support, you need to have the right resources to be able to navigate those systems successfully. But then again, like I said, it's like having those conversations within the family and really starting to think about how do we plan. That in itself can be challenging because you want to leave your house to all of the kids, as an example. And a lot of times what we were hearing in our focus groups is there was even some misunderstanding as to what it really means to properly leave the house. And so understanding that it's going a little bit step further of just leaving a will, as an example. You have to have that will, it has to be executed, it has to go through the proper processes. So I think it's a combination of all of those things.
This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm producer Sam Corey, speaking with Shari Williams, the Director of Equitable Neighborhood Planning for Detroit Future City. Detroit Future City recently began organizing a committee to ensure that people keep their homes in their name and don't lose an opportunity for home ownership and wealth building. I guess there's one other perspective I want to talk about before talking about some of the work that y'all are doing, which is that I think some people might look at this issue and they might be critical of the heirs. They might say that, hey, they're not organized, they didn't plan well, and that they should have done that there was something wrong in their lives. Like this was kind of an easy thing for people to do, and they just didn't have sort of their stuff together. What do you say to that person who has that perspective?
It is a complicated and a very nuanced issue. I think there is a strong need for education within the community, which is taking place in the city of Detroit. There are several community development organizations and the city itself that has taken the lead on really starting to educate the community on how important it is to plan their estate. One of the things that we heard through our focus groups also was this notion of estate planning is still unfamiliar, particularly in the Black community. And a lot of times when we think about estate planning, you think about, someone that's big will consider themselves rich, have lots of money, lots of assets, right? And we heard that in our focus groups. And I'm going to go ahead and also say that I also kind of thought the same way. So I think if I were to respond to that person, I think that there is this reality that exists that Black communities in particular and other communities of color have historically been left out of a lot of opportunity. Redlining, not having access to legal services and estate planning historically has created this challenge that has to be overcome. And it just takes time, it takes education, it takes awareness. And I think that through a lot of the efforts that are taking place, we are starting to see more successes. And I think we'll continue to see more success as we continue to have these conversations within the community.
And you're doing a lot of that education. So let's get into it. You're creating a committee to help people keep their homes in their name to do this estate planning that we're talking about. What is the work going on in that committee?
What we've kind of positioned ourselves is to kind of take this citywide systems level leadership role. And so through cultivating partnerships, we convene our heirs property and estate planning steering committee. That group, that steering committee, includes public, philanthropic, and community organizations at the table. And we come together to really coordinate our efforts. So we're coordinating our efforts around education, around legal support, around policy reforms. We're really trying to ensure that we are rooted in understanding the nuances of the issue. We are ensuring that we're connected to the voices of the community and really thinking about ways to resolve this tangle title issue, to protect family homes and preserve Black wealth. That's really kind of like our North Star.
I guess I'm wondering, what should people do if they don't know whether they own the home that they're living in? They think it might be in their parents' or their family's name, but they haven't done the kind of estate planning that they might need to do to protect that home?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is tell them to pull the deed.
That was my conversation with Shari Williams. She's the Director of Equitable Neighborhood Planning for Detroit Future City. Coming up, America is responding to a lot of huge issues. What if we took a preventative mindset when trying to resolve these challenges instead of a reactive one? We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay right there.